Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Healing Her Halo. I'm your host, Patience Murray, and I am extremely excited to be joined by Diana DeBolt. And she is an ex corporate manager and a certified coach who empowers high achieving and neurodivergent women to create the life of their dreams. With expertise in communication, leadership development, and career coaching, Deanna helps clients transform their mindsets, embrace their strengths, and overcome limiting beliefs. She believes in listening to one's mind, body, and soul to find true desires and supports clients in living their healthiest, most authentic lives. Deanna, thank you so much for joining the show. We're so happy to have you.
I'm so excited to be here, Patience, and to talk to you today.
And, so we were just chatting it up a little bit before we, started recording. And guys, we had some technical difficulties. It's always like that when you're trying to do something and, you have a dream, you're trying to go after it, right? And live your most authentic life. But we were so excited to dive into this concept of the neurodivergent woman. And so, Deanna, what is a neurodivergent woman? What is that term? What does that mean?
Yeah, so neurodivergence, really, the definition of it is just your brain works differently than someone who's a neurotypical. That is literally the definition of it. But unfortunately, we've had such a negative connotation on what the word means. And a lot of people, so neurodivergence can look like someone with ADHD, someone who's on the autism spectrum, someone who has learning challenges like dyslexia, right? And we think of those as negative things. And a lot of the people I work with and talk to, especially women, they think it's so negative or that there's something wrong with them, that their brain works differently. My agenda is to show people that just because your brain works quote unquote differently, it doesn't mean that you're any less. Actually, I think there's a lot of strength in that, and looking at what your strengths are and actually showcasing that rather than focusing on your weaknesses. So that's
Mm-hmm.
really what encompasses neurodivergence as a whole. And I think for women, we're so hard on ourselves as women. And
Yeah.
I think the neurodivergence adds an extra layer of negativity. So, really, just about empowering neurodivergent women that they are amazing, they are fabulous, they have a lot of great strengths, and to actually use those and showcase those in every part of their life.
Wow. So thank you for breaking that down. I never came across this term before. So, and that makes a lot of sense as to the categories. So, what are some characteristics of being a neurodivergent woman? So, say if someone who's listening, they don't really know, um, I guess, what to look for within themselves to be able to know how to get the best help that they need to be the best selves that they can be.
Yeah, I think just in general, like if you're feeling any sort of discomfort around other people in your workplace or anything that you feel like you don't fit in, that might be a good indicator that you can look into it. But just some things to look at. And again, it's going to depend on, what type of neurodivergence you have, you are, what you identify with, and also on the spectrum. But a couple things you could look at, for example, a lot of people with ADHD are hyper focused. So they hyper focus on certain tasks, making it challenging to focus on everything else around them. Not understanding social cues as well is a really good indicator of neurodivergence, whether not understanding the tone of voice, the cadence of someone speaking, or yourself not being able to actually speak in a way uh, that other people can understand, right? So sometimes they think
Mm-hmm.
you're coming off as too aggressive or too cold when really just that's the way that you're speaking. You
Wow.
don't think that there's anything wrong with that. A lot of people with neurodivergence are really good at a certain task. And so they may not be good at other tasks, or they may just be less good at other tasks, which they think, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's a negative thing. But actually, can we look at what's the positive of that? People with
Mm-hmm.
neurodivergence can be extremely empathetic. So people that identify as extreme empaths could be neurodivergent because they're so hyper aware of their surroundings, and they tend to be much more empathetic. And because they're hyper focused on what's going on around them and everyone's tone of voice and how people are feeling, they can be extremely empathetic. So, those are just a few things where you can start to think, okay, maybe, you know, um, that
Yeah.
could be neurodivergence. Also, something else to mention is sensory sensitivities. So, if you're feeling like, bright lights, or when you're in the office, if you are around a lot of people and it's really noisy, or you just get distracted easily, that's also a very good indication that you could have some sort of neurodivergence.
Wow. That now I'm starting to wonder.
Yeah.
This is really interesting. So what inspired you to dive into this particular study of women? What, was it something that you were experiencing yourself or seeing in other people that kind of drew you to this?
So it actually found me. I did not find it. And, talking about like a spirituality point of view, I think that that's how it was meant to be. I've always been a very, I consider myself a powerful individual. I have a powerful voice. I'm definitely type A. I'm not afraid to say my opinion. And I've always felt in my life that I'm meant to stick up for other people who don't have a voice or don't have as strong of a voice. And my natural progression from corporate into becoming a coach, that was pretty natural. I was basically doing that in corporate as well. And so it just made sense to do that. And at first, I was more focused on career coaching. And I noticed that so many of my clients were neurodivergent. And I realized that a lot of the techniques and tools that I was using to help them were working. And they loved working with me, and I loved working with them. So it sort of just made sense that I focused on neurodivergent women. I found that they're the ones that they're just so special. And, obviously everyone is, but just neurodivergent women are so special in that they don't realize how amazing they are. And as someone who always wants to lift other women up and push them up, I felt like it was such a good match because I was able to give them that energy and support them. So really it found me.
Yeah, and okay, and so we're going to get into the strengths, right? Because you mentioned that there are a lot of strengths that women can use who are neurodivergent, but I heard you say that you love to empower other women. Where did you get that from? Is that something from childhood that you've just gravitated towards uplifting others, or did something happen and you became more empathetic? Sometimes I see that in stories, so I'm just curious.
I think it's definitely a case of nurture and nature.
Hmm.
I definitely think it's in my innate personality. If we're just talking about astrology, I have a lot of fire signs in my chart. So
Ah,
I'm very
same.
fiery. I'm an oldest daughter. I'm the first granddaughter. So that was also there. I have a very strong mother as well. Like her personality and her energy is very strong. So definitely got that
That's
from
beautiful.
there. So I definitely think to some extent it was inherited just in terms of my personality, but also it's something I gravitated towards. I think being the oldest child, oldest daughter as well, I think people can relate to that is you do grow up faster. And I have a sibling, I have two siblings, but one who's much younger than me. And so taking on that big sister or mother like role, I think was definitely there. I was actually reading my high school yearbooks, a couple months ago, and everything that people wrote was like, you give the best advice, you always supported
Oh,
me. I was just that person. I think
that's
always I was
beautiful.
just always open to helping other people, and I was like, you're amazing, you can do this, you got this. So I think it was just innately in me, and so it made sense that when I worked in corporate, I didn't know I wanted to be a leader, and I ended up naturally transitioning into that. And I loved supporting my team. There was nothing
Wow.
better than my team getting a promotion, getting a salary raise, fighting for them. I would always fight for them. That was like my main thing. So yes, I think it's definitely in my personality, but I obviously learned and cultivated those skills, as I went in my time in corporate and then becoming a coach as well. Nothing makes me happier than seeing other people succeed.
Wow. You truly are gifts. Really, and I'm so grateful that you're sharing your energy with us today. It's just truly a blessing to have this conversation with you. So let's get into the strengths. So, what are some of the strengths of the neurodivergent woman that they should really lean into, and how can they use those strengths to, propel themselves forward?
Yeah, so all the things I mentioned earlier that were quote unquote weaknesses, those are all strengths. So if we're looking at hyper focus, right, we can look at that as negative,
Hmm.
like, oh, you can't focus on other things. But to me, hyper focus means that you're someone that if I need, let's say I'm a leader and I need a specific task done and I need it done in a certain time with details, you're the person I'm going to give it to because you can hyper focus. I know you're going to be able to focus on that. If someone's extremely empathetic, that's an amazing friend. That's an amazing parent, right? That's an
Hmm.
amazing aunt, an amazing team member, right? You can use that within your career. And I think that what's important with understanding your strengths is then understanding what career you should be in. So a lot of the women I work with, they're in the wrong career, or maybe they're in the right industry, but they're in the wrong position, right? And so it's understanding what those strengths are, because you can be neurodivergent and be a great leader. Just maybe you're going to be a different leader than someone else. I don't think there's a
Mm,
one size fits all for everybody. Someone
right.
who, for example, let's say you have sensory issues, right? You get very overstimulated easily in the workplace. Okay, well, then can you work from home? And then you're going to be much more productive. So it's about
Mm.
creating those environments for neurodivergent individuals so that they can thrive, because when they have everything they need to thrive, they're actually going to be amazing in what they do. Because it's not that they're not as good or less than, it's just they need to have a different environment possibly than someone else does. And by giving them that environment, supporting them, they can get the work done at the same level or even better.
Now, I see where your passion for helping others in corporate comes in because I hear you basically saying listen to the people that are working for you and make sure that they have what they need to be the best that they can be within that role. And if they're in the wrong role, put them in the best role so they can be the most productive. Now, what if you're dealing with a situation where you can't change your environment and you can't change your role? Maybe you've tried, but nothing, is working. What can they do? What tools can they maybe adapt in that uncomfortable space to become more productive or to become more their best selves?
So I definitely encourage, before you make any big changes, is to first see if you can make any small changes in your current environment. So that's understanding first where the issues are, where your
Mhm.
challenges are. Maybe it's that you feel uncomfortable in the office because it's very noisy. Okay, then do you have a quiet space in the office? Can you use noise canceling headphones? Can you ask for more work from home days from your manager, right? Like, what are those small changes that you can make? Another example is communication is a big deal with neurodivergent individuals, because not everyone processes communication the same way. Some people prefer written, some people prefer oral, some people prefer both, or with words on a presentation. So, for example, let's say you like written communication and you're in a meeting. Can you ask your boss if you can use a software that's going to take meeting notes for you so that afterwards you can go back and look at those meeting notes, right? Or maybe you're someone that needs to have breaks between your meetings. So, can you ask for a 5-minute break between consecutive meetings? It's the small things that we can change in order to make a difference. Another thing is not only advocating for yourself, but setting boundaries. I'm extremely big on setting boundaries, and I think that we can do it in the workplace as well.
Me
It's
too.
so important. So, an example is
Yes.
some people who are neurodivergent get very overwhelmed when they're asked to take on a project. And because many neurodivergent individuals like to people please, they often say yes to things when they're overloaded. So an example is if you're someone's coming to you and asking you continuously, or it happens often, like, hey, can you take this project on? And you end up saying yes and you regret it. Instead, can you set a boundary of saying, okay, thank you for bringing this to me. I'm going to review this and I'll get back to you in 30 minutes. So, A, you have time to sort of regulate your nervous system, think on it, and come up with a response and kind of feel more calm in that response. And then go back to that person and say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm overworked right now, but we can start on this next week, for example. So, really coming up with those boundaries and enforcing them and setting them in the workplace. I think all of those small changes can really make a massive difference.
This is huge. This is really huge. And I love when, people have tangible tools, tangible, actionable steps that you can take because the reality is sometimes we're not able to handle a lot of things that are outside of our control. So, what can we do? What can we take responsibility for and make the steps to make ourselves better or make ourselves in a better position to be who we need to be in each moment? So, thank you for sharing that. And I guess the next question is how did you learn all of this? Was it through trial and error through your own? Do you consider yourself a neurodivergent woman?
I don't identify as
Okay.
neurodivergent, although as you said in the beginning, like your brain is turning. I do have some aspects that I feel like I resonate with. So,
Mm.
for example, now I work from home. I don't work in corporate anymore. And I think I would be very overwhelmed if I had to be in a corporate environment with a bunch of people all the time. My social anxiety, I definitely have high social anxiety. I call myself a recovered people pleaser. either. So I
Oh.
definitely so I definitely identify with a lot of those aspects, but I
Mhm.
wouldn't consider myself neurodivergent. But the way that I've learned this is one through trial and error. Yes, I had to do this on my own. About in 2020 during the pandemic, I had like a major shift. I had a major breakdown. I was at an all-time low emotionally, physically, every way, and I had to build myself up. And so as I was building my coaching business, I was also building myself up. So I learned a lot of tools through that. I went into a lot of mindset work, nervous system regulation, things like meditation. I was reading all the books, spirituality. I did a complete 180. And then obviously since then I do a lot of research. So I'm someone that loves to read. I love information. So I'm constantly learning new things. I work with other coaches to get information. And I believe as a coach that it's my duty to continuously learn and get new information so that I can support my clients as well.
That's phenomenal. And I don't think we talk about that enough about how important it is for our leaders to do the work themselves. And we have a lot of unhealed leaders. And a part of the inspiration for me to start this podcast, Healing Her Halo, is because I started to recognize when I would go to different women empowerment events, it didn't really feel so empowering.
Mm.
You know, and I wondered, I'm like, how are we navigating in these spaces, leading groups of people, and the energy, it just doesn't feel right. So I made a point. I'm like, hey, I think the first thing that we need to do before we go out in the world and like start trying to speak to people, even, or like guide people anywhere, we have to first guide ourselves to a place of healing and emotional regulation and just like this peace within ourselves. So that's why I wanted to speak to amazing people like you, and give tips to other people as well who are on their healing journey, so we can build ourselves up and become the leaders that we're in transition to being. I feel like we're always in transition. Would you agree that we're always in transition, or do you feel like there's a point that we get to where it's just like we're all good to go? But I'm curious what you think.
No, I absolutely don't think that. I think we need to constantly evolve and grow. Like as long as the world is spinning and we're all living here, I think until I take my last breath, I'm going to be learning and even beyond that. So I think that
Agreed.
that's my duty, and there's always more to learn. And I think the smartest, most intelligent, most socially aware, emotionally aware people are the ones that know that there's never enough. There's always more to
Mhm.
learn and change, and that's the only way that I can be not only support myself but support my clients as well if I'm continuously making myself better.
Hmm. And I heard you share some details about during COVID and having a mental collapse. A lot of people went through a shift. I feel like during COVID and the pandemic, I actually lost my brother during that time,
Oh, I'm so
and on
sorry.
top of, thank you. And when you talk about a shift and a mental collapse, I was all the way down in the gutter. So it took a lot of work that I didn't even know I needed to get out of that place. But I'm curious for you and your, situation that you were encountering or going through, what helped you? What were some of the leaders, right? What were the voices or the literature, the books? So what were those things that helped you get out of that place to propel in your coaching career?
So the first thing that I really needed to focus on was my like physical and mental well-being, because I was at the point where I was having panic attacks and crying all the time, and I was just a mess. So I couldn't even really think of like the coaching aspect at first. I was like, okay, how can
Yeah.
I get myself regulated? So that's when I started looking into things like meditation, nervous system regulation. Someone I love is Gabby Bernstein. She has a lot of really great meditations that I still recommend to my clients. She has a lot of cord cutting exercises. I felt like there was a lot
Mm.
of cord cutting, energetic cord cutting I needed to do with, my ex at the time, and friendships that I had that weren't serving me anymore, or family members' expectations that I felt like were put on me by other people. So
Mm.
it was really about building up my confidence. I started going to therapy. So I was in therapy for 2.5 years, which was massively helpful for me. I really needed to build my confidence up because I didn't realize that, that's why I was picking partners that weren't appropriate for me. That's why I was staying in friendships longer that weren't appropriate for me. It's why I wasn't starting my business sooner, because I had this low confidence and self-esteem, and that was my main focus at first, was just building myself back up so I could get to a point where I felt good, and then I could start learning all those extra tools and resources that I needed.
That's so good. That's so good. I feel like that's going to help so many people. Just what you said there. And thank you for being vulnerable, because sometimes, we kind of act like we have it all together and we just were, just born to be who we were and all of these things, right? But not sharing the fact that we're like snot ball crying in the corner, trying to, get ourselves together and, and then go out and be the person that we're supposed to be. But sometimes it's a process just getting yourself together. And thank you for being vulnerable. Oh my gosh. So I think this is going really well. I do want to get into some of the work that you do with your clients, right? Because this is a huge service that you provide to other people. So what would be, I guess, like the first place where you would start with one of your clients? Like, what would be the most important area to target first? Is it the confidence? Is it the emotional regulation? Is it dealing with the sensory issues? Like, what would be the most pertinent?
So it obviously depends on the clients, but out of everyone, what I normally see is that there's an issue with their mindset and knowing what's possible. So I have clients that come to me and they're like, I'm unhappy, I have this issue. Usually they can identify the issue, but they don't know how to fix the issue. And when I give them alternate scenarios, they're like, oh, I didn't even know that was an option. So oftentimes it's even just like opening their eyes to the fact that you can see the world a different way, you can think different things, or you're not broken. A lot of times it's just saying you're not broken. You're amazing and you have so many amazing skills. So it's usually the mindset work. People come to me and they're like, "Oh, I want a new job." And I'm like, "Okay, we can do that." And it ends up
Uh-huh.
being about mindset work and getting their confidence up and really boosting them, and then we can get to the part about, okay, how do we job search and apply to roles,
Wow.
like the strategic aspect. So it's usually always something that's internal that we have to work on first, and building that confidence is typically what I see, especially with these women. I work with a lot of high achieving women. They make six figures, they're at amazing roles, and they still aren't confident in
Wow,
themselves.
that's mind blowing to me. I feel like you have this assumption that when you get to a certain place in life financially or in just career wise, the title, you got it finally. And you just assume that everything is just going to align that within yourself. But you just don't factor in that you could possibly be this same person just with a different title.
I think I think it's the opposite. I think you first
Mm,
have to do the mindset. I don't I think, people want to manifest the car, the money, the house, but manifesting that, the reason you want to manifest that is because you think it's going to bring you a feeling that you're missing, but that's not going to bring you the feeling that you're missing. It's just going to amplify everything you're already feeling. So first you have to change how you feel, how you see yourself, the type of person that you are, the happiness, the gratitude that you feel, and then when the other things come, because then they will come, then you'll actually appreciate it and be happy with those extra things.
wow, that's mind blowing. But it's right online. I always hear people say like you have to be in vibration with a thing that you're attracting, otherwise you won't ever get it. So I think that's in the same frame of like what you're saying right now. Wow,
Yeah,
that's
that's all the manifestation and the energy work and everything. Like saying, like, if you think of the highest version of yourself that has everything she's ever wanted, how can you start embodying her today? So that's why we talk a
mhm,
lot of tools like gratitude, being grateful for what you have, language shifting. How would the higher version of yourself speak, right? Even just
mhm.
telling my clients, like, okay, go in the mirror and say five nice things to yourself every day and look at yourself, right? Like little tools that they can do to build themselves up, because then, if even if we don't do the mindset work, and let's say I get them or they end up getting the interview for the job that they've always wanted, if they haven't done
Mhm.
the mindset work, they're not going to believe that they belong there,
Mm.
even if they're there. So we have to do the mindset work first so that they can then go into that interview thinking, I deserve to be here, and then land the job that they want.
This is so good. This is so good. Okay, so I want to take a transition back to the workplace, because this is a huge, area that you deal with women in the workplace and who are, in these really powerful roles. But let's say other people in the workplace, their energy isn't so great. Maybe their frequency isn't aligned for the things that they want to attract. how do you maintain your energy within all of that and all of these different the politics that go on in the workplace? Like, what's some tools that you can just use to keep yourself aligned to the things that you are manifesting while dealing with everybody and their noise in the workplace?
So, the first thing you want to look at is what's in your control versus what is not in your control. I recommend making a list. I think it's helpful. And then, whatever is not in your control, you need to release because you can't do anything about it anyways. You're putting energy towards something that you can't change. For example, you can't change your bosses. You can't change the tasks that you're given, right? Okay, then what are those things that you can control? Maybe it's how often you're in the office. Maybe it's who you talk to and work with. Maybe it's the type of music you listen to during the day, right? Like there's many things. Like
Hmm.
the amount of sleep you get, how well you're hydrated, are you feeding yourself? Those are all things that are actually really helpful that people don't realize, like those small things of just that self care. Like, what are those things that you can control? And then what are those things you can't? And then you just focus your energy on the things you can control. Something else that I noticed, and I was just talking about this with a client, is she's really unhappy at her job. She has a lot of negative energy. She doesn't like the vibe. And I said, okay, but if you keep thinking that the workplace and you keep saying and speaking into the universe that your workplace is negative, that's all you're going to notice. So, can you
Mm.
start saying, my workplace is great. I have friends here that I love speaking to. I have a great job. Like, can you start saying those positive affirmations? Because then your brain is literally going to be reprogrammed to then focus on those things. It's not that all the negativity goes away, it's just that you're going to start focusing on the positive, which is really what affirmations are doing for you when you rewire your brain. And then, of course, what's most important, what we talked about, is setting boundaries. So, for example, if you have a boss that's just super annoying or just rude or whatever,
Oof.
can't, yeah, I have a few of those. We have a lot of those, unfortunately.
Oh gosh.
Uh, it's like, can you set boundaries? So, a lot of things
Mhm.
I tell my clients is, okay, can you limit your interactions with them? Can you limit the interactions to emailing so you don't have to be face to face? Can you sit far away from them in the office? When they're in the office, can you work from home? So, what are those things you can do to limit your interactions? So, doing those things can really make a big difference to help you feel more comfortable. And then, just again, focusing on yourself. Listen to podcasts that you like, music you like that uplifts you. Do all the things that make you happy around your life, in work and at home, so that those negative energies feel less intense when they're actually happening.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. I love practical tips.
I
Practical
love them
tips.
too.
Yes, things that you can pull away. So,
Yeah.
ladies, I hope you're listening.
Mhm.
Okay. So, one other thing, success. It sounds like sometimes when we're on our healing journey, it feels like we're never going to get there, and it feels like no matter what we do, let's say we're in day 3 or 4 of really intentionally doing the affirmations, intentionally saying, speaking life into our environment, or intentionally putting on the music. And so, for those people who are in that transition of trying to get to that point where it all like kind of clicks or transforms a different way, what it can like what is a story, or do you have like an example of, like, you don't have to say any names or anything like that, whether it be from your own personal experience doing the affirmations or doing the work, where it actually worked, like where actually you felt different?
Yeah, so I often think that people think when you're manifesting something or you're trying to change that you're going to have this big epiphany one day from the next. And I don't actually think that's how it works. I think it's super gradual. And something that I did that was really helpful for me is when I was going through my healing journey, I journaled every single day. I just did it in my notes app and I wrote down how I was feeling, whether it was one sentence, 100 sentences, I wrote. And then every couple of weeks or so, I would read it back and I would realize how far I've actually come. Because you don't think you know how far you've come until you see where you were before. That was something that was super, super helpful for me. Of course, at the beginning, for me, that was really obvious was when I stopped having panic attacks. I stopped crying all the
Hmm.
time. I was sleeping better. That was an obvious sign to me.
Yeah.
Uh, when I gained weight back, that was a sign to me because I literally
Wow.
wasn't eating during the time when I was like really low. Like I literally couldn't eat, which is not like me because I love food. So that
Oh
was
my
not
gosh.
like me. I lost a lot of weight, and then when I started getting my appetite back and gaining more weight,
Mhm,
I knew that I was happier again. And that's obviously a bigger discussion because I've had a lot of issues with my weight and things that people have said and being bullied with that. But that was a really good
mhm,
indication, and also not feeling that way anymore and being more positive about myself was when I could look in the mirror and not not have hate and not have such negative feelings. That was when I knew that there were changes being had. So it was really just in like the day-to-day things at first. And then of
mhm.
course as I went on in my business, making money, all those things, but I think at the beginning it's more just about how you see yourself and sort of that day-to-day how you're physically feeling as well.
Wow. And thank you for opening up about your journey, with your weight. And I'm sure that was a tough thing, and I'm so proud of you. I'm
Thank
so
you.
proud of you. You're just such a light, and you've been such a light this whole interview. And I know your clients are grateful to have you. And man, how can we, if someone listening right now, if they really want to, connect with you and maybe sign up, for your services, like what would be the best way for them to go about doing that?
So there's a couple ways on social media. You can feel free to DM me. My DMs are always open. I'm always checking them, reaching out to people. You can email me as well. It's on my website. Everything is linked on my social media. I also have an application form to fill out if you'd like to work with me one to one. But I do one to one coaching. I'm pretty flexible with supporting clients and their needs, but one to one online and, talking to me during the week as well on Voxer. So there's a lot of different options also. And I love working with neurodivergent women, with leaders, especially as well, and also, consulting with organizations because I think it's really important to start at the top and really have companies, organizations that are actually helping and supporting their team members. The burden shouldn't just be on the individual to advocate for themselves. We also have to start at the top and make those changes. So that's also what I'm really passionate about.
That learning is so important, and trauma informed leadership, I feel
Yes.
like, is really, really important. So, thank you for taking up that charge of being that bold voice that we need,
Someone
in
has
these
to do it.
spaces. Somebody has to do it. Who's going to tell him?
I
Who's
know.
going to tell him?
Well, it's going to be
So,
me, I guess.
thank you for your work. Thank you for your work so much. Okay. So, usually when we get to the end of the interview, I usually like to ask, if there's anything in particular, women who are listening to this, I feel like they're fighting to get that light back. And that's where the healing halo, putting that spark back into your halo, because sometimes it can get dim. It can get really dim.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that you heard, a quote or affirmation, or maybe something from your own personal, just Rolodex of things that you like to say to yourself, what's something that you can say to a woman right now who needs a spark put back in her halo?
I think affirmations are a great place to start. And a great one to say is just, I am worthy, because that encompasses everything. It's about women understanding that they don't have to have the six-figure job, the fiance, the kids, the whatever to be worthy. You are worthy literally because you're alive and breathing. And that is it, period, the end. So, if you want to start with just one thing, I would start with saying that affirmation every single morning, the second you wake up, every single night before you go to bed. Say it 5 times. And after a week or two, you're going to start feeling the difference.
Deanna, thank you so much for your time today. You've been such a spark for us, and we're going to take in every word and we're going to apply these actionable, practical tools. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone that's listening. And Deanna, if you have anything else you want to share, we're all ears. This is your time to shine if you'd like, but we're just so grateful to have you today.
I'm just so happy to be here, Patience. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And I just hope all women realize their worth and that they are worthy. And we just want to spread all of that energy to everybody.
All right, you heard it here first. Thank you, ladies, for listening. Know that you're worthy, and this has been another episode of Healing Her Halo.